Greetings, my name is Pete Ring. My background is in military aviation and in particular fighters and choppers. I do these chats on behalf of Air Force Association New South Wales and on behalf of Wings magazine and also for our Wings Australia YouTube channel. Could I also ask that if you like our videos, then please subscribe to our channel and have a look at the description on our channel for this video, and you'll find links to subscribing to our magazine called Wings and subscribing to Air Force Association New South Wales. Well, welcome Bert Milne. Thanks for this chat. I'm looking forward mostly to hearing about your time in Vietnam on Caribous, so we can kick off on that with what was the Caribou's role in Vietnam?
Well, we had several roles, but we were working with the 834th Air Division, sort of controlled our planning and so on. Our primary role was the carriage of cargo and passengers around anywhere from 1 to 4 corps, and everywhere in between. And we had, on quite a number of occasions, you carry ammunition. We used to do body runs occasionally where you'd bring back the deceased from areas of battle back into Saigon, to the morgue at Saigon. We had what were called combat essential missions, which were missions that you had to complete. You know, there was pretty much no excuse for not landing or delivering your particular cargo on a combat essential mission, because that's exactly what it was. It was combat essential. Generally, the guys had run out of ammunition, generally.
Yeah.
So you go in under FAC and fighter, well, FAC and either heavy chopper or fighter cover as well while that was happening. So
what's the FAC, mate?
What's that?
What's the FAC?
Oh, the Ford air controller. That's a FAC.
Right. And what they do for a living?
Well, they were around to control, you know, the aircraft, either the gunship attacks or the fighter. FAC and fighter generally went together, of course.
Okay.
So they'd be controlling the mission insofar as the fighter guys are concerned, to get them to the right place at the right time, more or less, and make sure that they did their job there.
So it must have been a pretty well coordinated thing for you to be in there in the Caribou, and then maybe some choppers with a bit of firepower, and maybe some fighters with some surface air to surface. So it must have been pretty well coordinated.
Oh yeah, when it happened, I mean, generally you didn't have a lot of fighter cover. I mean, there was often in a number of the missions you'd have chopper cover, gunship type cover if there was a threat at the time. But it required a fair bit of. I can remember one in particular where we had a mission down in the Delta, and it was a combat essential mission, and we were delivering ammunition to this little airfield, which we went in under FAC and fighter cover, and there were F4s there at the time, and they were actually dropping ordnance quite close to the runway where we were parked, and that was a bit of an adventure. I mean, there was some pretty wild stuff going down at that time, but the troops, I can remember, were pretty glad to see us when we did get in there, because they're essentially, out of ammo.
So was it true that you guys had a reputation for getting the job done when it came to the essentials, whereas maybe you even got it done a little bit more reliably than the other transports
Absolutely, absolutely, without doubt. Yeah, that's right. No, we, we were, well, actually, we were acknowledged by even the Yanks to, have done a significantly more efficient sort of program
Yeah.
than they expected, because I mean we only had, I think, 7 aircraft there, but we flew, for long days. I mean, on the average, I was just looking at the logbook before, just as out of a bit of interest, and there was never a month, well, almost never a month where you didn't fly at least 100 hours a month.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was a pretty significant sort of, and in that time, I mean, in my time there and in the other guys' times there, you would fly 2,000 sorties plus in your 12 months there. So, I mean, it was a busy time, and it was something that we prided ourselves in, and the squadron always did right from the start. I mean, we were the first in and the last out, and we did an awful lot of really good work, and that was acknowledged. We're not just blowing it up our own trousers, that was acknowledged by the Yanks as well, so it was a significant effort, and I mean, when you think of all the support on the ground, all the ground crew guys, the engineers and all the support that we had to be able to do that. I mean, you'd land there, on dusk at the end of the day at Vung Tau, and the guys then would have to work on the aircraft, and they'd work just, through the night if they had to get the aircraft ready for the next day.
Wow.
I mean, they're really good outfit, really.
So that was a sign of the morale of the whole unit, because just doesn't happen without the morale and the unity and the teamwork being very high.
No, that's right. No, absolutely. It takes a lot of effort on everybody's part to make that happen.
So I suppose people are assuming, and so they should, that you're an aircraft captain on occasions, and maybe you flew in the other seat on occasions.
Yeah, well, what it was, we were all captains up there. There were no co-pilots.
Yeah.
So we used to do leg for leg generally.
Yeah.
We just swap it about as required. So, yeah, that was the case.
Okay. And there were how many crew on board? Like you mentioned, the two pilots doing leg for leg. Who was down the back?
Well, down the back we had one loadmaster engineer, and on occasions we had another guy, generally a general hand, and we used to give these guys a bit of a go to, get out of Vung Tau and get out of the general hand world, to be able to go and assist on loading and unloading the aircraft on some of the missions. So sometimes you'd have two guys down the back, but generally you'd have one, which was the loadmaster slash engineer. And I mean, these guys were just fantastic. I mean, the work they did in the conditions that sometimes appeared. I mean, if you're in the middle of nowhere and you break down, that's not a good place to be, And
Exactly
these guys,
what I was thinking.
Yeah, well, these guys would, they'd fix just about anything on the airplane. They were fantastic.
So that engineer gave you a lot of confidence at remote strips that there was someone there to look after the aircraft that was needed.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was the only, and generally, well, in most cases, I mean, most of the work we did was pretty remote. I mean, there were, of course, bigger places that you'd go into, the central sort of distribution type places. But once you get out of there, you're pretty much on your own, So these guys were invaluable. They were fantastic.
Just talk about the environment you're operating in the air, in regard to maybe air traffic, in regard to other combat aircraft, in regard to ground fire, in regard to what sort of ground fire. Just describe the environment that you had to fly in to get the job done.
Yeah, well, generally it was relatively safe. I mean, we used to transit from point to point above 3,000 feet, which was out of small arms fire, range. We had cover if we needed it. You know, there were artillery advisory centres right through the whole of South Vietnam. And these guys, their job was to advise you if there'd been incoming at your destination or if there'd been any problem around the area where you were operating so that you could avoid it. We had, interesting things that would happen along the way where I can remember one time we were going into a place on the Cambodian border down in Forkor, and there was a B-52 strike, a buff strike they called them, a big ugly F, was dropping big bombs along this area pretty close to the border. And of course you had to avoid that. So the artillery advisory guys would tell you to, you know, stay well clear of this particular area. And of course, what we used to do was to get as close as you could to it so you could watch it. You know? I mean, it's a pretty interesting thing to watch a B-52 strike from relatively close quarters.
So they're carrying in excess of about 100 weapons, aren't they? 100 bombs.
I don't know how many they'd have on board, but no, they used to do a number on them. I'll tell you, the poor buggers, really. I mean, we used to, subsequent to a number of their raids, the big B-52 raids, we used to go in and they called it a wobbly run, which was the poor buggers that had been on the ground nearby to, you know, a buff strike. Could be, their balance would be affected because of the impact of the bombing. And these guys, quite a number of them couldn't even walk, you know, and they'd be picked up and thrown in the back and taken off to a prisoner of war camp down at An Toi off the bottom of South Vietnam. But it wasn't, that wasn't pretty, I've got to say, you know.
So was the environment there then, as you said, above 3,000 was pretty good? What about when you were approaching some of the remote airfields? Was there more intense fire on occasions?
Oh yeah, there were. I mean, quite a number of the guys took ground fire. You know, often you wouldn't even know that you'd been hit. I mean, you'd land and there'd be just holes through the back of the aeroplane, sort of thing, from small arms fire. So, I mean, that wasn't that rare. I mean, they used to, obviously, the nearer that you got to the ground, to a known area, like, you know, the turnaround areas, they used to target them to the point where often you'd land on a little runway and you'd go to the offload area at the end of the runway, and you could feel a bump as the nose wheel would go through a sort of where they'd landed a mortar round or some sort of munition, just to zero in and get their targeting right. And if you taxied through one of them, it wasn't a pleasant feeling because you knew that that particular area had been surveyed by the bad guys, you know, and you could end up with a bit of trouble if you got caught.
So what sort of tactics did you have to adopt to deliver cargo in regard to the hostility of the environment? Did you have different tactics for different environments?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you were operating into a larger, you know, one of the larger distribution centres like Bin Tui South down in Forkor, or, you know, the big areas, obviously it's just like going into a safe airfield. The more unsafe it became, the tactic was to get in and out as quick as you could. And that involved doing what they called speed offloads, which was where you'd land. As you landed, you know, the loadmasters would be then unstrapping the load, or, you know, getting it ready to be ejected out of the aircraft. And you used to be able to, because you could select reverse with the aeroplane and you could reverse it, you used to be able to taxi into an area, you know, come to a halt, select reverse, give it a full gutful of reverse, and then a full gutful of forward power, and it would just eject the load out the back. particularly rolling drums and things, but you could eject just about anything out. And while this was happening, you're running before takeoff checks so that, you're on the ground for the minimum amount of time. You hit the runway and you were gone as quick as you could, because, you're a big, slow target, and you just don't need to be around there, if you
That's
can
good,
help
mate.
it.
I love the that was a method I hadn't no one's talked about before. So did you do any actual airdrops of cargo, or mainly just paratroopers?
No, we didn't drop while I was there. We didn't drop anything um, deliberately out of the aeroplane. Uh, Prior to me, I was there 69, 70. So, there was a fair bit of time before us, and I know that they used to supply the montagnards, the mountain guys that were trying to keep on side. They used to supply them with fresh meat. They'd airdrop in, apparently, cattle and stuff like that, just to keep them, happy. They used to do airdrop flares, for night. If there were night missions going on, they'd be involved with dropping flares and things.
So did you? What's the load where you fly at low altitude down the airstrip and let the parachute at the back and drag the load off? What's that called?
Yeah, well, that was a
Lately.
method. Yeah, a LAPES, a low altitude parachute extraction system, was the thing. But LAPES worked, but that wasn't done. Well, we were all qualified to do it, but that wasn't used up there.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay.
You'd be committing yourself to being quite low for quite a while, because the approach is low and the go around is fairly low. So you're exposing yourself to, trouble probably a bit more than, doing a steep approach and steep takeoff type of thing.
Did you considering morale had to be so high, and all the teamwork, and considering how the hours you are working and how that can tire you out, did the name Wallaby Airlines help keep morale up?
Yeah, well, that was established obviously before I got there. But yeah, the Yanks, they certainly knew who we were, because there wasn't anybody else called that in South Vietnam. But that I don't quite know exactly who coined the identification as Wallaby, but it was a good one, yeah, and we were very proud of it. That was something that often the Yanks had never seen an Australian before, let alone an aircraft of ours, and certainly not one that was called Wallaby. So, it used to get commented on, fairly regularly in a lot of places.
That was good. So I haven't asked this yet, but people over there who went to Vietnam, the Caribous, like many of the people who went to Vietnam, were very young. How you had a lot of responsibility on your hands as the captain, one of the captains of the Caribous. How old were you?
Well, I was 21. I turned 22 just after I got up there. So I was relatively old, I guess. Most of our pilots, of course, that went to Caribou's, there was 6 of us posted there off course. And we were all roughly the same age, some were a little bit older, but generally that. But yeah, we hadn't been. I was the first of our course to actually get posted there to Vietnam, and yeah, we were all much the same age, in the very early 20s or whatever. But my young brother, he was there with 9 Squadron after I came back, Lockie, and he was 19, I think, when he hit there. He was on gunships up there. So, there were the odd guys who were, really, God, just kids when you look back at it. you know.
Well, yeah, do you sit there now and look back and go, man, I was only a kid.
Well, you do, obviously the older you get, the more it falls into into place, you think,
It goes to show, though, you were capable of discipline, self-discipline,
well,
and
most of the time.
well, yeah, but I mean, if self-discipline didn't exist, it probably wasn't so paramount where you were at the time. But it
That's right.
probably demonstrates that when self-discipline was needed in some of the operations, you could master that, and because that would have been one of the things that kept you safe.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you had that was the big thing I think to get used to was the actual environment, because I mean it was like a boy's own adventure, to be honest, in the beginning when you get up there. And I mean, to go into an area where, the flying demands were just about as extreme as you can get in many areas. I mean, some of the runways we went to, the weather conditions we operated into, some of the terrain, up north around Dalat, Kamlee, up in 1 and 2 Corps type of thing, those areas up in the mountains there, that was pretty interesting sort of stuff. And that was, and I mean, you were operating on your own. That was the other big thing. You didn't have somebody looking over your shoulder the whole time. I mean, you were out there and you had to make the decisions, and if you made
Yeah,
the wrong ones, you were going to pay the price.
yeah, yeah.
So whilst we weren't perfect by any means, I mean, we used to have a bit of fun, which was probably a bit naughty, but nonetheless, we didn't write any off, I don't think, while everyone was doing the fun thing.
So how long were you up there for?
12 months.
Okay, now 12 months with lots of adrenaline runs, lots of need for focus, for attention to detail, for uh, fluid situations. I'm going to go back to Vietnam again in a minute, but I'm going to just ask you now, when you hit the Australian shores again, did you find that more orderliness in Australia and less threat and less pressure? How did you find the change from Vietnam back into operations in Australia?
Well, it was a bit boring, to be honest. It was sort of, I can remember coming back in particular to the Air Movement Centre, where you'd get all these rules. All of a sudden you're impacted by all these rules that determined what you could and couldn't do, and you had all these people running around saying, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And you're sort of sitting there saying, well, I've just done it for 12 months, that's just rubbish. Of course you can do it. But, that was part of the program. Of course, you come back into an operation that's not as free as you were used to, and where you were making the decisions before, then they're being made by somebody else.
Yeah.
I
think there's some lessons in that for all of us without asking you what lessons, but there's lessons in how much motivation and how much initiative and how much innovation comes out of a bit more freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But also the structure, probably the structure also is necessary to success. So to me, a hell of a balance between those two things, that if you get it right, it's good. And if you don't get it right, it can do all sorts of nasty things.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. I mean, the book of can't do is now, a metre thick, and the book of can do is about 1.5 inches.
Yes, I think we lost the balance.
Yeah, so do I. And I mean that loss of I mean, airmanship was defined as the safe operation of the aircraft on the ground and in the air, and you had to display airmanship. Now, the further I stayed in aviation, and I was in it for quite a long time, I went to Qantas after 20 odd years in the RAF. And, the longer you stayed in, the more, they seemed determined to stifle good airmanship. they didn't leave it to you. They'd make up human resources and aviation psychology and some other branch or something else. And that started to stifle all what was used to be your decision making and your sort of understanding of airmanship.
Yeah. The big topic, but wouldn't
I
mind.
know where you're going. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind starting another another YouTube video on that very topic, because that's a really interesting topic, I think. So to say that you would be generally under fire most days in the Caribou, not under maybe life-threatening fire, but generally speaking, you'd have to be prepared to cop around here or there.
Yeah, but you wouldn't. It wouldn't happen every day. I mean, it
Okay.
wasn't something that would happen every day. I mean, it was something that would happen more rarely than it did. Sort of commonly.
Okay.
But the potential is always there.
So tell me about your most startling mission you flew while you're up there, and take your time. Don't rush it.
Yeah, righto. Well, probably the biggest thing was the
What were you doing?
well, we were doing a mission down in the Delta out of Forecourt.
So what's the Delta?
Well, down in the bottom of Vietnam, from south of Saigon down to the very tip of Vietnam. So that involves where the Delta is. It's generally a flat area. There's a few peaks, a few mountain areas interspersed with it, but generally flat. It's where they grow all the rice, basically. That was the sort of the region. And on this particular occasion, we were tasked with, we were to do 5 missions throughout the day of carrying loads of aviation fuel from Binh Tui across to a little place called Phat Son, which was right on the Cambodian border, pretty much due west of where we were picking it up. And we'd deliver it. And I guess it'd be about I don't know, I can't remember now exactly, but probably 40, 45 minutes flight time, I guess, something like that. We were on this particular, it was the first mission of the day, and we'd flown down there via another little airfield, dropped something off there, and then we went to pick up our load, which we did. I went in and checked with the ALCC, they were called, which was the advisory sort of group that would tell you how safe it was to operate to your destination, basically. And we did that as a matter of course. And you'd check and say, how's it looking through? Then they'd say, yeah, that's fine, which they did. And we took off, and we were amongst another group of Yanks. I think there were 3 other American aircraft Caribous doing the same sort of thing. And they were, I think we were number 3 in the group of 4, or number 3 and 5, whatever it was. And we took off. We weren't allowed to fly into Cambodia. That was the rule at that point. We were getting really close to it. And Mick Calvert, who was the co-captain on that particular leg, Mick said, I reckon we should go down because, we're almost at the Cambodian border. And I said, yeah, righto. So we had bad weather at the time. There was low cloud and there was a few holes here. Anyway, we found a hole, and we said to the Yanks, we're pulling out, we're going down. And they said, oh, yeah, righto, Wallaby. So off we went on our lonesome, found a hole, went down through it, found Phat Son, which was an airfield attached to a sort of a village type area. When I say village, I don't mean little grass huts or so on. I mean, they were built, but the Americans were in there. There was a small group of Americans, I think 4 of them, that was stationed there, ostensibly to look after them and, keep them on side. Anyway, we got down there. We couldn't contact the tower, which was the first problem that we had, but that's not that unusual. I mean, you're in remote areas and maintenance of equipment wasn't that good sometimes. So we made a couple of calls. We tried all the VHF and UHF and FM frequencies, no reply. We rang Chowduck Artillery, which was the artillery advisory nearest to Thatson, and he was about 30 miles away, something like that. And we said to Chowduck, Artie, what's been going on? Has there anything been happening here? And he said, no, it's fine. So we did a couple of laps of the airfield and it was just dead quiet. So we had no excuse not to land. So we landed and landed on runway 08, taxied to the far end of the runway, and there was a PSP area, quite a large area there, which was essentially fuel dump for 44-gallon drums. And there would have been, as you will see in some of the photos, probably a couple of hundred drums lying there on their side, most of them full, I would guess. Anyway, I said to the guys, well, we don't want to hang around here because it didn't feel right. There was something, a gut feeling that, this was not altogether a place that I wanted to be at the time. And we taxied in and I said, we'll do a speed offload. We'll run the checks as we go, sort of thing, try and get out of there as quick as we could. So we taxied off the runway into this area that was attached to the side of the runway where all the fuel was lying in the drums. And I did a U-turn, taxied forward a bit, and I was about to come into reverse and then do the speed offload bit. And the loadmaster said, do you want to straighten it up, sir? Because I wasn't quite absolutely lined up dead straight with the drums behind us, because I'd like to get them in neat lines. And I said, no, bugger it, mate, let's just get them out, get them off, So I'd ended up with about probably, 15-degree sort of angle on the wing that probably, if I'd lined up correctly, would have been that amount different. And they'd taken, there were two loadmasters, there were one loadmaster and one general hand, Bob Lang. Nev Church was the loadmaster, Bob Lang, and Mick Calvert, who was the co-captain. Anyway, they were bending over down the back and they were unstrapping the load as we were taxiing in. And they were down to one strap, and I came to a halt, and then just looking out to the runway, which was literally maybe 30 metres away, probably a bit closer, and there just appeared this perfect little plume of white smoke, just came straight out of the ground, dead vertical, no noise. It just sort of poof and up it came, and I can remember thinking, what in the hell is that? And then about a couple of seconds after that, or it felt like a couple of seconds, there was a massive explosion on the port wing, just outboard of the port engine, luckily. And that was a mortar, the second mortar. The one on the runway with the white plume was the first one. The second one was the one that went right through the port wing, and that just blew a huge hole, almost from leading to trailing edge. And it just exploded. Then there were three other rounds, one just behind the aeroplane in the fuel dump, another one just behind that, and another one further away. So they'd sort of laid a string across us. Anyway, that explosion, when it hit, it sort of compressed the left-hand wing on the port oleo as far as it could go, and then it sort of flung itself back upwards and threw me. I was strapped in, of course. It didn't throw me out, but it threw me across the console type of thing towards Mick, and I didn't have my helmet fully secured at the time because it's so bloody hot. I had the chin strap undone, I think, and it almost threw that off. Anyway, it then resettled itself, and I pulled my hat back on and looked outside, out the port window, and it just went boomf and just exploded. The port wing exploded. And at that point, it was quite obvious that we weren't going to be flying anywhere because we had a rather large hole in the middle of our lift producing area of the wing. So
that's a very scientific explanation. That's very good.
yeah, well,
You
I
haven't
used to
had
be.
what was happening to your emotions yet.
I used to be CFI at CFS, so I say these sorts of things, you see. Anyway, I'm going to cop some flack for saying that. I know all my mates are going to give me grief over this, but anyway. So, yeah, so it was obvious we weren't going to fly it. So I just pulled the mixtures to cut off, which stopped both the engines. And we unstrapped post haste and roared down the back, and we got to the back of the aeroplane, and there's Mick and Nev. There's Bob and Nev standing there, and I actually saw Bob at an Anzac Day march about 4 or 5 years ago in Brisbane. This is the general hand who was the assistant loadie on the day, and he said to me, "Oh, g'day, sir. How you going?" I said, "Bob, it's been probably 30 years since I was a sir. You don't have to call me sir." And he said, "Yeah, righto, sir." But he said, when we got hit up there, and I said, "Yeah, I can remember it quite well." And he said, "Do you remember what you said as you roared down the back, past us?" And I said, "No, I don't really, Bob. What did I say?" And he said, "You said F off." And I said, "Oh, did I?" And he said, "Yeah, but you said it twice." I said, "Righto, mate. Fair enough." That's what happened. And
Now, where did you F off to?
right to the middle of the fuel dump, which was the only cover. And that was not the smartest move we'd ever made. But we'd never been there in our life. We had no idea who was where, what was hitting us. So you just duck for cover, and the only cover we had were 44-gallon drums of aviation gas, which was not good. So anyway, we jumped in there. They then opened up with all sorts of stuff. The bad guys were on the side of a hill about, I don't know, less than a K away anyway, and they started, there was RPG and heavy machine gun stuff, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, that started raining down. And we looked about, and there was off in the distance a little bit, there was a couple of smaller drums with a steel plate, a 1/2-inch steel plate lying across the top of it. And it was sort of like a little, what do you call it, a little protection area that you could duck into anyway. So saw that and said, well, let's head for that. At least some of it was underground. And we roared over there and dived in the back of this thing, and it's all dark inside the bloody thing. And as we dived in, there's 3 Asian guys with guns sitting at the far end of this. And I thought, oh God, let's hope these are the right side. Anyway, it proved that they were, they're going, novice, because we aren't Christ. Mind you, we didn't have a gun on us. We were absolutely, when we left the aeroplane, we left in such a rush. We had 3 SLRs that were locked in the aircraft because they were scared of people stealing them. And the key was in the emergency hydraulic hand pump thing, I think. We had a 9mm in our survival vest, but that was draped over the back of the seat because it was so bloody hot we could never wear the damn things. So we'd left everything when we'd done a runner, and we're in a hole now with Asian blokes with guns, and we've got nothing. Anyway, they were friendlies, so that was good. And we stayed there for a bit, probably, I don't know, an hour, maybe a bit more, and they continued to, give it a bit of a workover. And then we could hear this, it went quiet, and these lapses in the attacks where you go from frenetic activity and tremendous amount of noise and so on, and then nothing. And you could hear a pin drop, it was just most amazing sort of contrast. Anyway, we were quiet here, and we could hear this thing coming, roaring down this road right near where these buildings were, just about a couple hundred metres away. And it was a Yank in a forklift who was trying to get to us, and he got almost to us, and they started brassing him up with something pretty heavy. So he did a U-E and went back. Then there was more fun times for a while, and then we heard a Jeep coming, and this Jeep was coming at 1,000,000 miles an hour. This thing was just roaring, ran down this road, and it came through a U-E in front of just where we were, and we all jumped out, and he said, come on, go, We jumped in the back of this thing, and he had a tin hat for us and is it the M1, the American rifle? Had a rifle each for us and a tin hat, and we all piled in the back of this thing and roared off to this little blockhouse. It was a little concrete type room, about 10 by 10. And in there was an American second lieutenant or a lieutenant, sergeant, and a couple of troops. And we could see the aeroplane burning away in the background. Anyway, we got in there and we said, look, we were told that there was nothing happening here. And he said, well, we've been copping it since 1 a.m., so they've been under attack for quite a while. And in fact, there were quite a few of the enemy who'd been killed out on the wire, not far from in front of where we were. I think there were about 25 of them or so. Anyway, I said to him, can you, we've got to tell our squadron that, we've been hit and we need to get out of here. And he said, well, I said, have you got any comms? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what? And he said, well, you can ring your squadron on that phone over there. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Well, we're in the middle of nowhere. And anyway, it was some sort of radio field telephone type thing. And I rang 35 Squadron and spoke to Mike Andrews, who was the admin at the squadron. I think the CO was out on a mission somewhere, and said, Mick, we're under fire. We've lost the aeroplane and we need to get out of here. We need some help. And he thought we were just joking with him, and he just sort of started laughing. Well, as he laughed, they bounced an RPG off the top of this building we were in. And I said to him, well, you hear that, mate? We're not joking, and he was serious after that. But anyway, we spent the rest of the day. They had a heavy fire team of choppers they'd called up to try and suppress the fire. That was copping a hiding from the bad guys. And then they sent in some TAC jets at the end of that, and they started bombing them, which was the thing that turned the whole thing around, because that did, pull them back into gear. I tried to get out on a chopper that had came down to, and it landed near us, and I went over to him and asked, and he said, no, we can't lift you, mate. We've got to go back. So we stayed there, and we got out of there mid-afternoon sometime. So we were there for quite a while. There was quite a lot of activity for most of the time, and eventually we got out. And we were choppered out, and then got to Chow Duck, and then one of the squadron aircraft came down, and Joe Wilson was flying it, picked us up and took us back to Vung Tau. So big day out.
Big day out. That's a good description.
Mm.
Well, I think we might end it on that note, because I don't think you're going to go over. I don't think you're going to top that one.
No, it was the only time that I could tell you a story like that, But yeah, so lucky. I mean, later on the next day, some of those photos show the damage to the aircraft that rolled back into the fuel and just melted it to ash. And the amount of damage when we did one quick trip to it to try and get the rifles and the classified documents off the aeroplane, in a break in the ground fire, and the damage done to the aeroplane was, particularly the back. I mean, the whole the whole empennage, the whole back of the aeroplane was just shredded, with shrapnel from the mortar round it. And the only thing that saved us was the engine. And had I straightened, that was the other thing. Had I straightened it up, the mortar round would have landed just in front of the wing.
Wow.
That's how close it was, and that would have taken us out at the front, without a doubt. So lucky.
There are times in your life where you're in the right place at the right time, and you got to keep remembering that when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I've been in the wrong place a few times, but anyway, that was the right time. So yeah.
All right. Well, I've got to thank you because I've enjoyed that, and I'll catch up with you another time. But
right,
very much. That was a very interesting chat we had. I loved every minute of it.
Righto, mate. Well, good luck to you and keep up the good work. I admire you.
Good on you, mate. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this chat, then please subscribe to our channel. Our channel supports veterans directly and indirectly. We are all volunteers. Additionally, if you go to the description of this particular video, you'll see links to the Australian Military Aviation History Association and links to Air Force Association New South Wales, and you'll see the subscription button to subscribe to our premium aviation magazine.